Welcome everyone to this another episode in the ancient history of Bharat. This is a new series that we have started and we are exploring some of the resources. The first resource for this series that I have chosen is this book. For those of you who want to refer to it, you can. Okay. This book is available on Amazon. It is a series of, I'm not really sure, 8 or 9 books. Okay, from the very beginning of time up until the transfer of power in 1947. Okay, it is for those of you who have already built a good foundation of the history of Bharat, because it's not like what happens is history usually students are they're not I would say they are usually habituated to learning history from the perspective of the West. That is when the colonization started, when these Spanish and the Portuguese explorers went to other lands, and from there on onwards. Okay, and it's not a fault of theirs as well, because in the schools as well, we are being taught history from, okay, this is the point where Vasco da Gama came over here, then the Christopher Columbus went to USA, and then there was Industrial Revolution, and then there was Russian Revolution, French Revolution. So the study of history has been tied up with the history of largely the European continent, and to be very specific, only just the Western Europe, the western part of the European continent. So whenever you start learning the history of Bharat, okay, it will take a bit of patience, because in the very beginning it is simply just assumptions upon assumptions. Quite frankly, due to the reason that the excavations that are done are just not sufficient. Okay, there are a lot of artifacts that we still need to excavate, but due to the change in course of the rivers of Punjab, we simply cannot. Okay, so all that we can do is form rational conclusions based on whatever limited evidence that is available to us, and on top of that, okay, there are some lies. Okay, you largely see that the theories of the white people will find a lot of currency amongst the scholarship. Now it is quite uh, expected that the scholars in the West would um, subscribe to the scholarship that the Westerners themselves have come up with. Okay, but I don't understand the reason why majority of the students, okay, scholars, I would say scholars from 1930 and 47 onwards, they were functioning under this a regime that functioned on racial superiority. So I could pretty much understand that why they were convinced. But since 47 onwards, okay, we are living in a democracy. Okay, and whatever the shortcomings may be, of the democracy of Bharat, okay, now there is no foreign rule above us. All right, so we must question these paradigms on which we are forced to think. Largely, whenever history is taught in our schools, we are asked to subscribe to the postulates and the theories and the assumptions that were formulated by the Western scholars. And all throughout this book, even R.C. Majumdar largely depends on the assumptions and the postulates of the white scholars. And when I say white scholars, I mean the Western scholars. I'm not being racial in that term. Okay, so, but they clearly were racially conscious when they came up with these theories of racial superiority, as in white being the superior race, and then brown, and then black. Okay, so today we are going to focus on chapter number 13. Okay, the name of this chapter is Aryan settlements in Bharat. Yes, that is, if you doubt it, I will show it to you. This is the name. Okay, so the Aryan settlements in Bharat, the geographical names in the Rig Samhita. Now, the oldest surviving outpourings of the human mind is the Rig Samhita, meaning somebody actually wrote it, and they wrote it during the time when the contemporary civilizations, unless and until there is a conclusive evidence put forth, they did not know how to write. Otherwise, the Rig Samhita wouldn't be the oldest outpourings of the human mind, outpourings of the human thought, or rather the Aryan thought. All right. So they knew how to write. And like I said, the Rig Samhita itself, the original manuscript of the Rig Samhita itself does not survive. Okay, it is the commentary and the translation of that commentary survives. So now what we are left with is some analysis of the text that is put forward. Okay, now let's see. Right, let me just arrange my mic in a certain way that it captures my voice. All right. So let's see. Okay. The hymns of the Rig Samhita contain abundant geographical data. Okay, they're talking about certain geographical places. Okay, we don't know what these places are, but we'll try to form a rational conclusion, a rational inference based on what all these places are. Okay. Courses of rivers, especially in the Punjab, have considerably changed in the course of the last 3 or 4 millennia. Okay. Now here you'll have to keep in mind there are certain evidences. I'll point towards this contemporary notion of the run of Kutch. Okay, the area of Gujarat where there is run of Kutch earlier wasn't that barren. It wasn't a desert always. It is a very recent phenomenon, and when I say very recent, I mean in geographical time scale. Okay, not in the literal time scale as in our day-to-day activities recent, very recent. No, when I say very recent, I mean it in a geographical sense of way, that is the barrenness or the desertification of the place that we today know as Kutch is a very recent phenomenon in a geographical time scale. Meaning earlier there used to be a river that used to flow through it, and this has also been proved by contemporary scholars as well, that indeed there was a river that flowed across the land that we today call as Run of Kutch. Okay, so clearly the Rig Samhita is talking about the places that earlier were not underneath water, but now due to change in course of rivers are. Okay, so we'll have to use a certain degree of imagination and visualization when we talk about these things, because what will happen is in the Rig Samhita they'll talk about a certain place. Okay, they'll describe the surroundings. So let's dig deep what R.C. Majumdar has mentioned in his book. All right. As regards mountains, only the Himalayas is directly mentioned in the Rig Samhita. Munjavant, one of the peaks, being referred to as the source of Soma. Soma has, I guess, largely been identified as something that is intoxicating. It could either be hemp or it could either be liquor. We don't know. Okay, at least we don't know with absolute certainty. So the Rig Samhita describes Himalayas as, they mention Himalayas, and one of the hills is Munjavant. The Rig Samhita mentions it. Rivers in the Rig Samhita age, they were esteemed as deities. Okay, this idea of worshipping river. Now, in our previous series of Unlearning the Falsehood, and the very, very beginning of the series, we had spoken about how there is this syncretic relationship between the pagan and the forces of nature. Okay, because for us, and when I say us, I mean pagans, for pagans, nature is not a resource to be exploited. Nature is a deity to be worshipped and utilize whatever fruits that accrue to you by the virtue of that worship. Okay, this is a syncretic relationship between pagan and the nature or the land on which he or she nourishes and flourishes. Okay, but this idea, okay, the monotheistic people, the Christians and the Muslims, they are divorced from this idea. They do not subscribe to this idea of holy land. Okay, for them, anywhere they go and start converting people, and hence that land will become theirs. Okay, for the pagans, such is not the case. For them, any land that they find is, okay to be exploited. So hence you will see the colonization. Why, was there a what was the moral justification for colonization? Obviously, they had these ideas of racial superiority and all that, but there had to be some moral justification as well, and that was, okay, that there is nothing worship worthy in the land on which you live, in the natural resources that you use. Okay, so the very idea of syncretic relationship of a pagan with his or her land roots from the Rig Samhita that was written in 1400 BC. And it says, rivers were esteemed as deities, meaning they were something that you need to worship. Okay. Moving ahead. On page number 246, R.C. Majumdar says, outside the rivers in the Indus basin are mentioned. Okay, outside the rivers in the Indus basin are mentioned Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, and Sarayu. Ganga does not appear to be a well-known or even important stream in the period of the Rig Samhita. Yamuna has been mentioned thrice in the Rig Samhita, which refers to the great victory of the Sudas and the Tritsus on the Yamuna in the famous Dasrajana. Saraswati is the river par excellence. Now I would really want to take you back to the narrative of the West, where they said that there existed no river named Saraswati. That was the narrative that the West had put forward earlier. It took a lot of convincing by the native scholars that yes, indeed there existed a Saraswati. And now there is a book. I'm not really sure. There is this person, General G.D. Bakshi, if I'm not wrong. He has written a book about Saraswati civilization. Okay, so if you want to dig a little bit deeper into this theory, you can read his book. Okay, but there indeed existed a river called Saraswati, and it has been mentioned in the Rig Samhita, and it was, it was like a river par excellence. Okay, and Ganga, that is, Ganga, that is considered the mother of this civilization, has not been mentioned very frequently in the Rig Samhita. Instead, it is Yamuna that has been mentioned very frequently. Okay, in fact, it has been mentioned thrice in the Rig Samhita. All right. So again, I would like to, just to divert from the agenda of the discussion. We are taught about this thing called, the cultural or the tradition of Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb. Now, both the Ganga and both the Yamuna have been mentioned in the Rig Veda since 1400 BC. Okay. So you should ask this, okay, if you have any Muslim colleagues, any Muslim friends, if any, okay, you must ask them, if Ganga and Jamuna both find their mention in the Rig Veda in the 1400 BC, what specific and what exact is the contribution of Islam to the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb that can be specifically and organically traced back to Islam? This is something you must ask. Okay. Next up, R.C. Majumdar writes, in many passages of the Rig Veda, that is Rig Samhita, the Sindhu is meant by the Saraswati. It may be observed in this connection that it is possible that Saraswati was as large as the Satlaj in the Vedic age and actually reached the sea as the Rig Samhita describes it. Okay, now keep this thing in mind. Okay, it is very well quoted, and also there is a quotation given from the Rig Samhita as well in this book. It says that the river Saraswati, ended in a sea or a large water body. Okay, but the Westerners, they have claimed that the early Aryans who lived in the Aryan civilization on the land of Bharat, okay, they did not have knowledge about navigation and the sea. So how do you reconcile those two things? Because the Rig Samhita explicitly mentions that the Saraswati river ended in an ocean. So how did they know it? If they knew, what was the extent of their understanding of the navigation and all those things? Okay, so all these things are open to interpretation. You do not have to take, or you need not take. Let me correct myself. You must not take the word of the West for anything that relates to your history and to your identity. Okay. The Saraswati was the first of the Vedic rivers, and its banks witnessed the development of the Vedic sacrifices. Okay, the Vedic sacrifices originated on the banks of, the Saraswati river. Again, on the same page, R.C. Majumdar writes, then we pass on to the 5 streams, which is the Satudri, Vipas, Parushni, Asikani, and Vitasta, which give Punjab its name and united together flow into the Indus. Now, this makes you wonder, why are the names of the rivers have been not, reverted back to their original names? Because here Vitasta is Jhelum. Okay. and all the other rivers can be, Sutudri is Satluj, and all the rivers have been traced back. Okay, so why exactly haven't they been given the real name? Because this is the origin of those names, right? All the contemporary names are the perversions of the organic names that they had from 1400 BC. Okay, so the Rig Samhita also mentions these rivers as well. So for this is again, I would say, a thought experiment or a visualization exercise. If indeed the Aryans who lived in the times of the Rig Samhita, they knew or they possessed knowledge and their language was developed enough to name the rivers such as Sutudri, Vipas, and Vitasta. Okay, so it wouldn't be a fallacy to assume that they were adept in the sciences of navigation and all the other things that related to it. Okay, because their language was developed enough to name them, so at least they would have developed some ways of navigating through these rivers, because you'll find there are civilizations that have, settlements that have been excavated at the banks of these civilizations. So wouldn't they have interchange and exchange between the communities that had settled on these rivers? So wouldn't they have to exchange and trade with all those people? Okay, so it's common sense to assume that they were very well adept with the science of navigation. Okay, we'll cover that in the further paragraph. It is given somewhere in this chapter itself. Okay, and page number 247, R.C. Majumdar says Parushni, the modern Ravi, okay, was an important stream which played a decisive part in the Dasrajan, Battle of the Ten Kings. Okay, now the interesting part is the Rig Samhita. It was told to us, or rather, it is an accepted fact that that the Rig Samhita is largely a collection of hymns. But what people fail to understand is there is also something called Dasrajan War, Battle of the Ten Kings, that finds its mention in the Rig Samhita. So if indeed the Rig Samhita was a collection of simple hymns that were chanted during the priestly and the sacrificial, ceremonies, why would they mention the Battle of the Ten Kings? It must have, played a significant role into changing the psyche, into changing the thoughts of people during the time, and hence it finds mention in the Rig Samhita. Okay, imagine somebody writing an original manuscript in 14 or 1500 BC. Why would they include this war? Okay, and that also you can re-engineer these theories. If there were wars, if there were 10 kings fighting together in a war, it wouldn't be far-fetched to imagine that they had considerably developed the theories of war and art of war as well. Okay, if 10 kings are fighting each other on a single battlefield, they must have had significant and considerable development in the sciences of war. They must have developed sufficient weaponry for them to stand a chance to win the war. They wouldn't just go keep running and keep carrying stones in their hands and expect them to win. So if they were fighting a war, okay, and keep in mind, this was written down. We don't know if this was an oral tradition that had been carried on through centuries of oral tradition and then finally written down. So we don't exactly know, even if so there is no conclusive evidence to say that Dasrajan war, it took place during the writing down of the Rig Samhita itself. Okay, so all you can do is speculate and visualize these things and believe what sounds or seems more convincing to you. Okay, later Asikani, known later as Chandrabhaga in the modern Chenab in Punjab, finally comes Vitasta, the most westerly of these 5 rivers known today as Jhelum. Okay, again, I would really not go into why was the name changed to Jhelum and why hasn't it been reverted to its to her real name, that is Vitasta. There is something that you must think, because all these things have now been made political. These are matters of simple fact. Why is it political to revert a name of a place back to its history? Why is it political? So again, then the people would argue that what difference will it make to change the name of that place? Then why exactly was it changed in the first place? We are simply just reverting. We are not changing the name of that place. We are reverting it to what it was. Okay? So your theory of changing makes no difference. Then we are acting upon that theory. Yes, we are simply just returning it to what it was earlier. We are not changing it. Okay? As a place name, Harappa has been suggested as the modern name of Hariyupia. Okay, even the name that we study in our textbooks, that is Harappa civilization, that is also a perversion of the name of Hariyupia. Okay, so Hari as a name existed in 1400 BC, a name that we today use it in the, as a prefix to the people, or like it is used to denote to somebody who is godly, I would say. Okay. Many other lesser streams have not yet been identified with any degree of certainty and are not mentioned here. Okay, there are also other names of rivers that are mentioned in the Rig Samhita, but we are not able to identify them, or we are not able to point to the exact location or the exact river. Like I said, there have been a lot of geographical changes. Okay, when you talk on a geographical time scale, okay, they talk in eons, not even in centuries, because a geographical change takes eons or millennia. Okay, so you can visualize and imagine the time scale, because the course of rivers, of the Indus rivers that you see this day, wasn't exactly that. Okay, and the Rig Samhita was written when it was, I wouldn't say the exact the tributaries of Indus were the exact same when the Rig Samhita was written. There might have been some changes. Okay, so we are talking in millennia over here, not even in centuries. Okay, so further R.C. Majumdar, he mentions, in conclusion, we must consider also the implication of the term Saptasindhava as used in the Rig Samhita. The term means a definite country in the Rig Samhita, whereas at other places, 7 streams themselves are intended. Okay, so it's pretty much ambiguous, the word Saptasindhava. It's not Saptasindhu, it's Saptasindhava. Okay. Now, this word itself has been used in multiple senses, meaning somewhere it is used as the name of a nation. Other places it is used as a name to denote the 7 tributaries of the river Sindhu. Okay, so what about the theory? Okay, so if you ask somebody, why exactly are we given this title of Hindus? Somebody would say, okay, Hindu is the corruption of the word Sindhu. Sindhu was a river, and people settled in that civilization. Hence, the the Persians, they had the word Hindus. The Greeks got the word Hindus from there, and hence we are not known as Hindus. Now, there are 2 problems with this theory. Number 1 is, just because somebody else called us by that name, are we supposed to accept that name? Okay. Number 2, are we supposed to assume that the Persians and the Greeks were intellectually honest when they came up with this theory? We don't know. Alright, but yes, this is something that you must think about. Considering the Rig Samhita mentions the Kubha as well. Kubha was a river that today we like to know as Kabul. Okay. Afghanistan is a disgrace of a nation, is a place that was under the Aryan civilization, but now there are no Aryans, okay, no descendants of those Aryans that live in that country. Okay. He goes on further to write this, R.C. Majumdar, he goes on further to write this. We may thus conclude that the extent of the country as reflected in the hymns is Afghanistan, the Punjab, parts of Sindh, Rajasthan, northwest frontier province, Kashmir, eastern India, up to the Sarayu. Okay. So the geographical area, the entire expanse of the geographical area that the Rig Samhita mentions, it extends from the current day Afghanistan up until Bihar, to the south, the Kathiawar Peninsula, and up until Karachi and all those places. So largely the entire part of, I would say, for the northern part of Bharat was exactly Aryan India. Okay, now this is again, I'm not putting my faith or lending weight to the theory of Aryan Dravidian divide. Okay, this is something that has been mentioned in the Rig Samhita. All right. Now we cannot operate under the assumption that whatever that is mentioned in the Rig Samhita is complete and absolute. There might have been things that they might have missed out into adding. There might have been things that would have been deliberately deleted from it for whatever interests. Okay, we don't exactly know. So we are operating under the assumption that Rig Samhita itself is incomplete, or rather the important parts of it have been deliberately destroyed when the libraries of Nalanda and all those places burnt. Okay. Yep. Again, he further goes on to write this. There is a difference of opinion among scholars as to the part of Bharat where the bulk of the Rig Samhita was composed. Okay, there is still no agreement where exactly was the Rig Samhita composed. What was the geographical backdrop in which this Aryan literature was composed? Okay, all we can do is form rational conclusion and inferences. Max Muller, Weber, Moyer, and other, see again, white scholars. We have to depend on their assumption. From this point forwards, we don't have to. Okay, it's the burden of proof is on the West to convince me as a descendant of an Aryan, or convince us as the rightful descendants of Aryans, that they indeed had something to do with our civilization. If they really think that they can stake claim to the civilization that was the epitome of human development. Okay, the burden of proof is on them, and hence you will see these white people, largely white scholars, they are hell-bent on convincing us that the Aryan civilization has had nothing to do with Bharat. So now you see the clear distinction. Max Muller, Weber, Moyer, and others held that Punjab was the main scene of the activity of the Rig Samhita, whereas more recent view put forth by Hopkins and Keith is that it was composed in the country round the Saraswati River south of the modern Ambala. Okay. Again, these scholars, they might have some literary value, okay, but I seriously question and doubt their intellectual honesty and integrity. We don't exactly know, because in the current era, in the contemporary era, it is usually Bharat that has been accused of plagiarism. Okay, what about things that you have taken in the form of Ganit Shastra? Okay, things that you have copied from our Shastras and everything else. So if we are going to talk about plagiarism, let's talk about that as well. So if you're going to play this game of mudslinging, you cannot stay inside a glass compartment. Right? R.C. Majumdar writes further, conclusions can be drawn only with much caution. It is easy to frame and support by plausible evidence various hypotheses, to which the only effective objection is that other hypotheses are equally legitimate. So all these things simply are hypotheses, and that the facts are too imperfect to allow for conclusions to be drawn. Okay, let's move ahead. He writes on page number 248, it is a controversial question whether the Aryan tribes in the days of the Rig Samhita had reached the ocean and the knowledge of sea of navigation. Again, okay, Keith and many other European scholars hold that there is no clear indication in the Rig Samhita period that the ocean and the sea navigation were known. Okay, so these are the two Western scholars. Keith and many European scholars hold, okay, that there is no evidence that the science of navigation was known to the people in the times of Rig Samhita. Then how do you mention, okay, how do you justify the mention of the fact that indeed river Saraswati ended in the ocean? Was it an assumption? Was it a prediction by the Aryan tribes during the Rig Samhita times? Okay, so you see how these things work. They will keep on denying. Okay, so they have some rational basis to justify that we do not form a nation state, or we do not deserve an exclusive nation state. Okay, all these things are linked. Okay, all these things have been carefully and deliberately crafted to make you believe that you do not belong to a nationhood, and hence you do not deserve a nation. Okay. The Saraswati is stated to have reached the sea, and the hymns, okay, R.C. Majumdar has quoted with specific, you know, like given that in page number this, 246, hymn this, yes, it's all mentioned in here. I have no reason to doubt R.C. Majumdar. He further writes, the knowledge of high tide can be inferred from the Rig Samhita I 1.48.3 is exactly given the hymn where you can go to, and it can be proved that the people or the Aryan tribes who composed the Rig Samhita, they knew the knowledge of, or they were in the possession of the knowledge of high tide and low tide. So how can you say that they did not, or were not acquainted with the science and the knowledge of navigation? Why? Because it suits your political narrative that we are the superior race and hence we built boats and hence we came over here and now you have to, oblige with our orders. So you think you'll have to connect the dots. Okay, you cannot stay ignorant through your entire life. All these references indubitably prove that the Rig Samhita people not only knew the sea but were mariners and had trade relations with the outside world. Okay, it's for you to judge. If you if you doubt what I'm saying, I'll suggest you buy this book, read it for yourself. Okay. Now here let's talk about the tribes in the Rig Samhita. Okay, there are some tribes of people and they have been mentioned by names. Okay, they have been mentioned by names. So let's see. First is Sudas. Okay, to start off, there is one single unity of tribes that is called Bharatas. Okay, that is where we get our name of Bharat. Okay, Bharatas were different tribes, but they were under this family of the name of Bharatas. Okay, the sons of Bharat are called Bharatas, and there were different tribes under the umbrella term of Bharatas. So Sudas was a Bharata king of the Tritsu family. This is mentioned in the Rig Samhita. This is not me making up. Okay, which was settled in the country which later came to be known as Brahmavarta. Okay, there was a Tritsu family. Alright, they had a king who went by the name of Sudas. Okay, and his nation was known as Brahmavarta. At first, Viswamitra, a scion of the Kusika family of the Bharatas, was the priest of the Sudas and led him to victorious campaigns on the Vipas and the Sutudri. Okay, the priest of the Tritsu family, he led them, okay, to victories on the banks of these rivers. Okay. Viswamitra, however, was dismissed later by Sudas, who appointed Vashishta as his priest, probably on account of superior Brahminical knowledge of the Vashishtas. Okay, so what rational inferences can you draw out of this? There were two priests. One was Viswamitra, another one was Vashishta. Okay, now the families had a priest, and that priest used to lead them to victories. Okay, now the battle between these tribes used to be for the royal priests. Okay, they would ask, okay, this royal priest is mine, and hence it was the possession for which there were wars. The priest was the possession for which there were wars. I'm not saying this. It is mentioned so in the Rig Samhita. If you need evidences, refer to this book that was written by R.C. Majumdar. Okay. Thereupon, a long and bitter rivalry ensued between the two priests, and in revenge, Viswamitra led a tribal confederacy of 10 kings against the Bharatas. The federation consisting of 5 well-known tribes. Now, there were 5 well-known tribes, okay, that were led by Viswamitra in a war against the Vashishta, who had overthrown Viswamitra from his place of royal priesthood. This is what the Rig Samhita mentions. Okay, and those 5 tribes were Puru, Yadu, Turvasa, Anu, and Druyu. These things are mentioned in the Rig Samhita. I'm not making these up. Okay. In the bloody and decisive struggle on the Parushni, the Bharatas emerged victorious. So, after the battle of the Ten King, the tribe of Bharatas they emerged victorious. Okay, it is written in the Rig Samhita. There was another battle that the Sudas had to fight in which the three tribes, Ajas, Sigrus, and Yakshus, had united under King Bheda. But these new assailants also met with the same fate and were defeated with great slaughter on the Jamna. Again, there was another battle, but these tribes again were destroyed. Okay. So these were the Rigvedic tribes. The Bharatas appear prominently in the Rig Samhita. So the tribes of the Bharatas. So where did this idea of a single unity under which these tribes exist? Isn't this the idea of a nationhood? Because if indeed they were different, why would they operate under this title of Bharatas? And this is not, I'm not making this up. This is all written in the Rig Samhita. And God knows what is lost in the translation. This is the English translation that we are referring to. Who knows what has been mentioned in the Sanskrit versions of these things and have been conveniently hidden by, being dishonest, intellectually dishonest about the translations themselves. Okay. So again, I urge you, do your own due diligence. If you are if you are a scholar of Sanskrit, I would urge that you refer to these things in Sanskrit itself and put these things out in the public domain for people to consume. So hence we can spread the word about Bharat being a nation state, okay, in 1400 BC. And yeah, so Vishwamitra, this is again on page number 249. R.C. Majumdar writes, Vishwamitra is referred to as Bharata Arsha Sabha and a Kaushika, so that he belonged to the Kusika family of the Bharatas. The exact relation of the Tritsus and the Bharatas cannot be determined, and there is a sharp difference of opinion among scholars on this subject, as expected. Okay, they will never let the thought of the Aryan singlehood or the Aryan unity of the Bharata tribe to consolidate and to crystallize. Why? Because then they will have to concede to this demand that indeed, the nationals of Bharat, they are a single nation statehood. Okay. Yes. So again, the scholarship largely there are sharp disagreements between the Tritsus and the Bharatas being were they different or were they same? Quite expectedly. Okay, next on page number 250, R.C. Majumdar writes, the Tritsus and their kinsfolk, the Bharatas, were at war with the various tribes on both sides of Parushni and Yamuna, as already stated. Okay, so the Tritsus and the Bharatas were already in a state of war. Okay, so in a nation where different tribes exists, there are bound to be wars. But that cannot be used as a reason or a justification to say that since they were in wars and hence they are not a single nation, or they do not function under the umbrella of a single nation statehood. Okay. In post Rig Samhita times, however, they coalesced with the Purus, their erstwhile enemies, to form the Kuru people of later times. Okay, we don't exactly know, but as and when time progressed, okay, all these races, they were intermingling and they were also producing new lineages. One of those lineages is the Kuru people. Initially, they were the Purus. So the Tritsus and the Bharatas, they intermingled and produced another lineage that goes by the name of Purus, and it was later perversed by the name of Kurus. Okay. Let's see what else R.C. Majumdar further writes. Though defeated in the Dasrajana, the Purus were a very important tribe in the days of the Rig Samhita. They were closely connected with the Tritsus and the Bharatas and lived on either side of Saraswati. The unusually large number of kings of the Purus suggests the importance of the tribe. The various names indicate following genealogy of the Puru kings. Okay, there are different names that are also been given. So Purus, P-U-R-U-S, Purus, indeed they were important because they have been frequently and extensively mentioned in the Rig Samhita. Okay. Again, so in a sense, okay, to consolidate the entire thing. In a sense, initially there was this single umbrella term of the Bharatas, and there were different tribes beneath that, you know, United Nations statehood of Bharat. Okay, and beneath that, all these different tribes, there are bound to be wars. Okay, when there are multiple tribes coexisting in a civilization, there are bound to be wars. Okay, and the mere fact that there were wars, this fact cannot be used that for justification that no, they did not exist as a single nation statehood. Okay, then you take out the bottom from the entire scholarship of nation statehood. Then how do you justify the nation statehood that were established after the peace treaty of Westphalia? So even the Catholics and the Protestants were fighting against each other. So that fact is not used as a justification for denying them their nation statehood. Okay. So yes, so there were multiple tribes under the single umbrella term of Bharatas. All those tribes fought, they intermingled, there were new tribes, then new lineage themselves were starting. Okay, so it is all under this umbrella term of Bharatas, and hence we call this great country of ours by the name of Bharat. Okay, India is simply what the West wants you to call your country. Okay. The Satpata Brahmana asserts the Krivi was the older name of the Panchalas. There are also another tribe who goes by the name of Panchalas as well. Okay. The Matsyas in the epic age lived to the west of the Surasenas of Mathura, that is in the modern Alwar, Bharatpur and Jaipur, which was probably their home also in the Rig Samhita age. Okay, so there were also some tribes who lived in the current day Rajasthan, more specifically Alwar, Bharatpur and Jaipur. They were known as Matsyas. Maybe they had something to do with the fish. Okay, it would be difficult for us to comprehend this logic because now it's all deserted. So how did a tribe who goes by the name of Matsyas, that means fish, existed in those days? There has to have been some proximity or some intellectual or cultural proximity to water. We don't exactly know. Okay. There are other tribes that have also been mentioned in the Rig Samhita, that is the Paktas, the Bhalanis, the Vishanis, Alinas and Sivas were the 5 frontier tribes. The Paktas lived in the hills from which the Krumu originates. So the word Pakta, okay, is the original name of the Pakhtun race. Okay, this all false narrative of Pathans being somewhat different from the homeland of Bharat or the original character of Bharat, they somehow being different, is all false. Okay, the Paktas find their mention in the Rig Samhita. Okay, so indeed they have dharmic origins, indeed they have Aryan origins. They are no different from the entire populace of Bharat. There might be some geographical modifications in their bodies and whatnot, but DNA wise, okay, identity wise, they are no different from us. Right now that they have been proselytized and radicalized and indoctrinated, that is a different story. Okay. Let's go further. The Chedis. This is also another tribe. The Chedis, who dwelt probably between the Yamuna and the Vindhyas, had a very powerful king who goes by the name of Kasu, who is said in a Dhanastuti to have made a gift of 10 kings as slaves to his priest. Okay, it is mentioned in the Rig Samhita that there was a king who goes by the name of Kasu, who belonged to the Chedi tribe. He gifted 10 kings as slaves to his priest. Okay, the Puranic literature represents the Chedis as an offshoot of the Yadus. Okay, the Usinaras are mentioned in the Aitreya Brahmana. So when I say Brahmana, I mean the literature, the commentary on the Vedas. Okay, commentary on the Samhitas, as dwelling in the middle country along with the Vasas and the Kuru Panchalas. The Gandharis, one of the frontier peoples, lived to the extreme northwest of Bharat. The good wool of the ship of the Gandharis has been referred to in the Rig Veda. It's also been referred that now you see why the wool from the hill tribes of those areas are famous, because it finds mention in the Rig Samhita that was written in 1400, BC, more than 2 millennia ago. And to this very day, these things are famous. Okay, but we are made to believe that it has no Aryan origin. It has no origin in the Dharma whatsoever. It is a current phenomenon, and we are not a single nation. A reference to the Prithus and the Parsus, okay, it cannot, however, definitely stated that the Parsus were the Persians. So there is also a tribe of people who goes by the name of Parsus, Parsus, that has been mentioned in the Rig Samhita. Who's to say, later on they are the ones who were called the Parsis? I'm just simply speculating. I'm not stating it out there. The Westerners believe that the Parsus were Persian, but there is clearly no evidence in the Rig Samhita to show. Okay, so if there is no evidence, if you are free to speculate, we can also speculate. Okay, again, one more example of the intellectual dishonesty of the West. The Kikatas occur in the Rig Samhita as a people under the Brahmaganda's leadership and hostile to the singer. Zimmer, on Yaska's authority, takes these people as non-Aryans and locates them in the country later known as Magad. Weber accepts the location but takes them to be Aryans, though at variance with the other Aryan tribes. Okay, so there are also other tribes. Okay, everything they practiced was in congruence with the Aryan practices, but still, since they were found far away in Magad, they were non-Aryan according to the Western scholars. And the other white scholar, Weber, he accepts that they were Aryan, but they were somehow in variance. So do you see, there is this, even in the scholarship, there is this game of good cop, bad cop going on. There will be some scholars in the West who will agree with the theory that yes, indeed, the homeland, the Aryan homeland are the parts of Western Europe. Okay, and then there will be other scholars who will disagree with them and say that no, Bharat is the home of the Aryanhood. So you see, good cop, bad cop, to always perpetually keep us in the state of confusion and never find our way back to our real identity. And why don't they want us to find our way to back to our real identity? Because they want it, or they want to make it easy for them to proselytize us. Okay, they wanted, since, why do people convert? Because they feel this absence of identity. They long for an identity. Okay, so they will keep us away. They'll keep us confused about our real origins and about our real identities. And hence that will make it easier for them to convert us. That is what it is. If you don't want to accept it, if you want to stay ignorant and live under a rock, then wait for the missionaries to arrive at your doorsteps. All right. One more thing, the Panis. There is another tribe that has been mentioned in the Rig Samhita, the Panis. Okay, they are said to be very opulent and rich. Okay, they never worshipped the gods or rewarded the priests. They were people, they were quite different. Okay, they will not worship the gods. They will never reward the priests. Okay, they were diametrically opposite. Okay, to the conventions. You have seen that there were wars that were undertaken to win over the royal priests or the priest who was guiding that kingdom to victory. Okay, we have also seen that there was a king who gifted 10 kings as a slave to the priest of that kingdom. But here was another tribe of people who goes by the name of Panis, who were very rich, who were very opulent. They never worshipped gods, or they never even venerated the priests. Okay, so you see, even they coexisted. There was no idea of not coexisting with others simply because they thought they were different. Obviously, the wars were going on. Okay, they have been described as selfish, non-sacrificing, with hostile speech. They were cattle owners and notorious cattle lifters, and in some passages definitely figure as demons who withheld the cows or waters of the heavens. Okay, so these kind of people also existed. Panis were merchants par excellence in the Rig Samhita age. They were merchants, and hence, by virtue of them being good merchants and good traders, they were opulent and rich. Okay, so if they were merchants, obviously they were traveling to places to merchant things. I don't know if that's the correct usage of the word, but yes, they would travel around places to trade things. How exactly would they travel? They might have been Okay, they might have been the Aryan sea traders who spread the Aryan culture to the west. Possible, why not? Okay. Dasas owned considerable wealth. Okay, this is not important. Yeah. All right. So, yes, these are the tribes that existed during those times under the single umbrella term of the name of Bharatas. Okay. So, those tribes they intermingled, they got separated. But this umbrella term of Bharatas, the tribes of the Bharatas or the sons of the Bharatas, it remained. And to this very day, it remains. It's simply just that we don't recognize it. Okay. Now let's see. There is another part to this chapter that goes by the name of the period of the later Samhitas, Brahmanas, Upanishads, and the Sutras. Okay. Let's see what R.C. Majumdar has to write about these things from page number 255 onwards. The word Samudra in later Vedic texts generally, if not invariably, means the sea. The reference in the Satpatha Brahmana to the eastern and western oceans probably suggests that the sea to the west of the Malabar and the Konkan coast and the sea to the south of the Dravid land or the Dravid peninsula were known to the people of that period. Okay, so there existed a name called Samudra in the commentaries upon the Samhitas that goes by the name of Brahmanas, and they mention these water bodies. So if they had knowledge of these water bodies, okay, it wouldn't be incorrect or it wouldn't be false to assume that they were well versed, acquainted in the knowledge of navigation or science of navigation. Okay, there were merchants. How exactly did they merchant? This is some visualization exercise, I would say reasoning exercises that you should do. Okay. There is also, an Aryan scripture that goes by the name of Taittiriya Aranyaka. Okay, these are again scriptures. They mention Mansarovar and Kailash mountain. That is something there are very venerable places to the pagans of this part of the world. Okay. Reva, the name of Narmada, which occurs only in the post-Vedic literature, is traced by Weber in the word Revottaras found in the Satpatha Brahmana, the literature. But the interpretation is doubtful. The Sadanira has been mentioned in the Satpatha Brahmana as the boundary between the Kosalas and the Videhas. Okay, Kosalas and Videhas are again two different tribes that existed during the Aryan era. Okay. The later Vedic literature refers to the three broad divisions of Bharat, the Brahmavarta or the Aryavarta, the Madhya Desha and the Dakshina Patha. Okay, so there were three specific divisions of the geography that we like to call today as Bharat, but that does not mean that those three existed as three separate nationhoods. Okay, these three divisions denote and signify three parts of a single nation, that was Bharat, and those three names were Aryavart, Madhyadesh and Dakshinapat. Okay. The extent and limits of these divisions cannot be defined with any degree of possibility because we don't know. There is no conclusive evidence to show. Okay. So there will be a useful idiot who will tell you that since there is no conclusive evidence to show, you should believe that they existed as separate nations. To them, I would like to say, since there is no conclusive evidence that can show that they were, since there is no conclusive evidence and, you want me to believe that they were separate nations, I can also use the same logic to say that since there is no conclusive evidence, I would believe that they were parts of a single nation statehood. Okay. Right, the tribes. Okay, this is page number 256, R.C. Majumdar writes, many of the old tribes disappear, pale into insignificance, are merged into others, or are known under new names, and many fresh tribes rise into prominence. Okay, like I've mentioned, Okay. So the Bharatas as a tribe, it disappears, but the fame of their kings is not lost to the text of this period. Okay. They talk about it, winning victories. The Kurus, the Kurus, along with the Panchalas, Vasas, and Usinaras, occupied the Madhya Desa. Okay, the middle part of the Bharat subcontinent. It was occupied by whom? Kurus, Panchalas, Vasas, and Usinaras. All right. The Kurus do not appear as people in the Rig Samhita, but Kuru forms part of the name of the king Kurukshet. Kurusravarna mentioned therein. There is a king who goes by the name of Kurusravarna. Okay, that has been mentioned in the Rig Samhita. The Atharva Samhita speaks of the Kuru king Parikshit. Okay, in whose reign the kingdom flourished. Okay, there was another tribe that goes by the name of Panchalas. Okay, the name does not appear in the Rig Samhita, but the Satpatha Brahmana states that the older name for the Panchalas was Krivi, which is found in the Rig Samhita. Webner and Geldner suggest the Panchalas represent the 5 tribes of the Rig Samhita, but it is not very probable. Clearly, again, there are white scholars who disagree with this idea of, the native knowledge. You are going to disagree. And quite frankly, it should not matter to us anymore. They are definitely and almost always will disagree with whatever you say. And when I say you, I mean say us. When Bharat as a nation says or believes something, the West will almost always disagree with us. But that should not be a reason as to why we should not stick to our position. Okay. On page number 257, R.C. Majumdar, he also mentions the Kuru Panchalas are the people par excellence in the Brahmana period. Brahmana period as in the literature Brahmana period. And they are referred to as a united nation. Okay. The mode of sacrifice of the Kuru Panchalas is spoken of as the best, and their Brahmanas gained eminence and fame in the period of Upanishad. The Kuru Panchala kings, the models for others, performed Rajasuyas and set out on their victorious raids in autumn and returned in summer. The speech is said to have been best spoken there, and the Samhitas and the Brahmanas seem to have been taken their definite form among the Kuru Panchalas. So it's all written down, okay? You don't have to take my word for it. Okay, next up is the Vitavyas are said to have come to ruin because blah blah blah. According to the Manusmriti, the Matsyas were included in the Brahma Rishi Desha. Remember how we talked about the Matsyas? Matsyas appear in connection with the Vasas in the Kaushitaki Upanishad and with the Salvas in the Gopatha Brahmana. Okay, so there is also a different tribe who goes by the name of Matsyas. We have also discussed about this, that they settled in the parts of Rajasthan that are currently very deserted. Okay, so how do you reconcile this logic of Matsya being a fish that connotes to water bodies existing in a part that currently is desertified? Okay. The name Ikshvaku occurs but once in the Rig Samhita, where it denotes a prince. The Satpatha Brahmana knows Purukutsa as Ikshvaka. Okay. The Kosala and Videha do not appear in the earlier Vedic literature, being first mentioned in the Satpatha Brahmana. Okay, so there is, I would say, since there has been a lot of destruction of the scholarship, of the native scholarship of the Aryans, and we'll not get into that because then things will get political and people will start losing their minds. But yes, there is significant loss of scholarship, and hence that is one of the reasons why we are not able to reconstruct the past, or we are not able to rebuild and reconstruct the way that will lead us to, our rightful identity. The close connection between the Kosalas and Videhas and the Kasis is indicated by the fact that the three had same Purohita acting for them. Okay, the same priest guided all these tribes to their glory. That is what this Smriti mentions. The Videhas rose into eminence later through their philosopher King Janak, who was a leading patron of the Upanishadic doctrines. Okay. There is also another tribe that goes by the name of Angas. The Angas, unknown to the Rig Samhita, are mentioned in the Atharva Samhita. There is no evidence in the Aryan literature for the view that the Angas and the Magadhas were non-Aryan people. Again, there will be some scholars, some white scholars in the West who will say that the Angas, okay, since they are not mentioned in the Rig Samhita and they are mentioned in the Atharva Samhita, they were non-Aryan. But there is no evidence in the literature to show that the Angas and Magadhas were non-Aryan people. You see the deliberate attempts to keep us away from our rightful identity. You'll have to be blind to not see this. Okay. Oldenburg, however, thinks that these tribes were earlier Aryan immigrants. Same, the good cop, bad cop play. Some of the white scholars will disagree, some of the white scholars will agree, so we'll perpetually stay confused. The Yajur Samhita includes the Vratya in the list of victims at Purushamedha, human sacrifice. The Vratyas were regarded as outcasts, and the Atharva Samhita and the Panchavipsa Brahmana and the Sutras describe a certain rite intended to secure for them admission into the Brahmana fold. Okay, so it is mentioned in the Rig Samhita there were certain rites and rituals that you could do. And so there are some ways and methods that have been described where you can use those rituals for social mobility, upward social mobility into the Varna Pratha or the Varna system. Okay, so clearly this proves beyond doubt that the Varna Pratha was very flexible and elastic. It wasn't rigid up until the later times. Okay, and the Brits and the others perverted it to suit their own narrative of racial superiority. Okay, just think about it. How do you turn a large race of people against each other when you convince them that these people have deliberately kept you poor and hence you should fight them? So instead of fighting amongst each other, they will look for an easier way out to simply just convert to their faith. Yes, I know it's a cruel game, but now that we are way past those phases, I'm not saying that the proselytization has stopped. It is still going on as we speak. Okay, and they shamelessly broadcast it live on YouTube, and there are videos on Instagram where they show how they are fooling people and then converting them. It's mind-boggling. Okay, all right, I guess that's all for this episode of Ancient History of Bharat. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching.